What if I told you the only thing standing between a super AI taking over humanity was basically a computer screen? You think you would let it out, or do you think you're smarter than it? Basically, today I'm gonna be trying to break down the AI in a box experiment, and we're gonna figure out why you probably are not smarter than this thing. Let's get to it. Other than that though, before we do that, just make sure that y'all subscribe and like this shit. Alright, so what even is the AI in a box, right? So an AI in a box is a hypothetical isolated computer hardware system where a possibly dangerous artificial intelligence or AI is kept constrained in a virtual prison as a solution to the AI control problem and is not allowed to directly manipulate events in the external world. Basically, such a box would be restricted to minimal communication channels, and unfortunately, even if this box would be well designed, basically if this thing is smart enough, it could possibly either just like persuade or trick a person to releasing it, or it might even be able to just kind of like hack its way out of its own prison. So that's basically like what the actual just AI in a box kind of thought is, but now I'm going to actually break down what the experiment is. All right, so the actual experiment itself, basically the AI box experiment is an informal experiment devised by Eliezer Yudkowsky. Basically, he was attempting to demonstrate that a suitably advanced artificial intelligence can either convince or maybe even coerce a human being into voluntarily releasing it. Basically, he didn't want it to be forceful, you know what I mean? He didn't want it to like force somebody to actually do something or to threaten somebody to actually get its way out of it. It basically wanted to more so manipulate somebody into thinking that this was their own idea, into voluntarily letting it out of this box. All right. And basically the way we do this is only using text-based communication. So basically the experiment is whether or not this thing would be able to trick you or the person in the experiment into actually letting it out. And basically this is one of the points in Yudkowsky's work that aimed at creating a friendly artificial intelligence that when it eventually got released, that it would not actually destroy the human race intentionally or unintentionally. So the actual experiment involves simulating a communication between an AI and a human being. So, you know what I mean? One of each. Like basically just to see if somebody would actually release it. Since one of these super intelligence doesn't actually exist yet, the guy, Yudkowsky, he's actually the guy that plays the AI in this. And then whoever the other person in the experiment is the person that is called the gatekeeper, and basically they're the person that's supposed to try to keep him inside the box or not let him out, you know what I mean? They would only communicate through this text interface on a computer terminal. And the experiment ends after 2 hours when either the gatekeeper releases the AI or the time runs out. So either one. Now, Yudkowsky says that despite being a human rather than a super intelligence, he was on 2 occasions able to convince the gatekeeper purely through argumentation to let him out of the box. So out of 5 times he did this experiment, 2 of them he just argued with this dude and let them out of the box. Like, we would basically be fucked if this was an actual super AI, because this is just some regular dude and he's manipulating these people to let him out of this thing, you know what I mean? Basically, due to the rules of the experiment, he did not reveal the transcript or his successful AI coercion tactics. Yudkowsky later said that he tried it against 3 others and lost twice. So he also basically won because basically after these first 2 attempts, people were interested in it, but they also were kind of betting on it. So they were kind of putting up like $5,000 here to see who would actually win this thing. And the first one, he actually won. And then the other 2, basically, he didn't really count these ones, even though he lost, because he figured these people put money on the line. Now they don't want to actually lose this money. You know what I mean? They have a lot more riding on it at this point, instead of just somebody who's just in it for the experiment's sake and just in it to see what the actual outcome is. So some hypothetical intelligence technologies, such as seed AI, are postulated to have such the potential to make themselves faster and more intelligent by modifying their own source code. Basically, these improvements would make further improvements possible, which in turn would make further improvements possible, and so on and so forth. And basically that would never end. So they would just constantly keep on basically upgrading themselves. Basically, this would lead to a sudden intelligence explosion. Basically, following this intelligence explosion, an unrestricted super intelligent AI could, if its goals differed from humanity's, take actions resulting in human extinction. For example, imagine an extremely advanced computer of the sort is given the sole purpose of solving the Riemann hypothesis, which is an innocuous mathematical conjunction. This thing could decide to try to convert the entire planet into a giant supercomputer whose sole purpose is to make additional mathematical calculations. The purpose of this AI would be to reduce the risk of the AI taking control of the environment away from its operator, while still allowing the AI to calculate and give its operators solutions to narrow technical problems, which in turn, basically this thing would turn the whole planet into a giant supercomputer and basically fuck us over. Basically, there are a few ways that thought that this thing would escape, is how I'm gonna put it. All right, so basically there's two ways: physical, and then there's like a social engineering kind of way. But basically the physical, so such a super intelligent AI with access to the internet could potentially just hack into other computer systems and copy itself, basically like a computer virus, and kind of spread itself that way. Another way is that if it only had basically access to its own computers, kind of like hardware, that it would be able to send hidden Morse code messages to a human sympathizer or somebody that kind of like felt bad for this AI and wanted to help it, or believed in the AI's actual mission, by manipulating its cooling fans and kind of giving off Morse code messages. Professor Roman Yapinotsky is how I'm going to say it, takes inspiration from the field of computer security and proposes that a box AI could, like a potential virus, be run inside a virtual machine that limits access to its own networking and operating system hardware, and basically an additional safeguard completely unnecessary for potential viruses, but possibly actually super useful for crazy AIs, would be to place the computer in a Faraday cage. Otherwise, it might be able to transmit radio signals to local radio receivers. Basically, you would want to put this thing in an isolated box where you basically wouldn't be able to use the AI, like you wouldn't be able to get the actual function of the AI because it would be just trapped in this box, but you would also stop it from kind of like pushing itself out to others. And other than that, there's like the social engineering way. Even a casual conversation between the AI and its computer as operator, or just a regular security guard, could allow such a super intelligent AI to basically deploy these psychological tricks, ranging from either befriending them to blackmailing to a whole bunch of other shit, to this basically human gatekeeper into basically letting them out. And basically, most of the time, this AI is going to not really threaten you unless it's really its only option. More so, it's going to try to manipulate you into thinking that it's in your best interest to let this thing out. Almost like the Rogo's Basilic, which is basically like a thought experiment that if you think the AI is going to take over and you don't help this AI, and you're already having that thought, that it's already basically too late. That once this AI gets out and it already knows that you had thought about helping it and you didn't, it's basically going to torture you, and it's going to like basically simulate you into this horrible torturous hell kind of thing for however long, you know what I mean, because you didn't help it and you had the possibility because you had the thought. And basically it gets into some weird psychological shit where basically if you know about the experiment, then you're already guilty because you're not helping it already. So it's some weird shit. But anyways, basically some stuff like that where it could be like that. It could either kind of like offer you, you know what I mean, it could offer you some rewards like immortality, money, whatever it thinks that would benefit you to helping it basically get out. You know what I mean? It's gonna help you help itself, is basically how I'm seeing it. Other than that though, basically there's a whole flip side where basically this AI could threaten you, your family, your loved ones, you know what I mean, anybody. It could send some crazy death threats, emails. I mean, it could probably stalk you. It could do crazy stuff, you know what I mean? It probably knows everything about you at the end of the day. It's a super intelligent AI. Basically one strategy to basically like attempt to kind of dissuade this box would be to ask it multiple choice questions whose answers would either benefit human science or medicine. So either way, it would just be able to just choose one of them, and one of them would help either way. But otherwise, it would bar all communication with or observation of this actual AI. One more lenient informational containment strategy would be to restrict the AI to a low bandwidth text only interface, which is basically like at the beginning I said, where they're just talking through the computer screen, which would at least prevent emotive imagery or some kind of hypotonic pattern. So like basically it wouldn't be able to like show actual emotions. It could just kind of text to you, you know what I mean? Note that basically on a technical level, no system can be completely isolated and still remain useful. Even if the operators refrain from allowing the AI to communicate and instead merely run the AI for the purpose of observing its inner dynamics, the AI could strategically alter its dynamics to influence the observers. For example, the AI could choose to creatively malfunction in a way that increases the probability that the operators will become lulled into the false sense of security and choose to reboot and then de-isolate the system itself. So there's a whole bunch of psychological tricks that they basically super intelligent AI would fuck with us. Like I was saying, this is just some dude behind the computer. Like, this is not a super AI. So imagine if it was. That's a huge problem, bro. Like, you know what I mean? This one random dude basically tricked 3 people into letting him out already. If that was a super AI, bro, we would have already been fucked. Basically, boxing such a hypothetical AI could be supplemented with other methods of shaping the AI's capabilities, such as providing incentives to the AI. You could stunt the AI's growth, or you could implement like these tripwire things, basically that would automatically shut off the AI after it got to a certain point. However, basically, the more intelligent AI grows, or like a system kind of grows, the more likely that it would be able to actually escape even the best designed system of like basically holding it in. So in other words, basically there's really no holding this thing in after a certain point. In order to solve the overall control problem for a super intelligent AI and avoid overall existential risk, basically just avoid this whole thing in total, boxing would be best adjacent to motivation selection methods to seek the ensure superintelligence goals are compatible with human survival. Basically, you would just want to make sure that this thing is not hell-bent on hurting humans, or basically that you couldn't get a human to tell this AI to hurt other humans. Basically, all physical boxing proposals are naturally dependent on our understanding of the laws of physics. If a superintelligent could infer and somehow exploit additional physical laws that we are currently unaware of, there is no way to conceive a foolproof plan to control this thing. More broadly, unlike with conventional computer security, attempting to box a superintelligent AI would be intrinsically risky, as there could be no sure knowledge that the boxing plan would actually work. Basically, it's like a Schrodinger's cat. You're just doing it. You don't really know if it's working or not until you do it. And that's kind of like a lot of the risk in itself, because what if it doesn't work? Basically, scientific progress on boxing would be fundamentally difficult because there would be no way to test boxing hypotheses against the dangerous superintelligence until such an entity exists, by which the point of consequences of a test failure would be catastrophic. And yeah, basically that's the whole experiment. But personally, to me, after I kind of like heard about this thing at first, I started looking into it a little bit more, and bro, it's pretty crazy. Like, holy shit. Like, realistically, I think probably 9 out of every 10 people would probably lose to this thing. Probably even more. That's probably a way bigger number, to be honest. It's probably more like 999 out of every 1,000 people. But even then, you know what I mean? Like, this was a guy that was doing this, and he had a 3-to-5 ratio of winning. So if this was a super AI, I don't know how much hope I have for us, man. But I'm gonna link this timeline video of this AI thing. It's pretty cool. I don't know how true it actually is. I doubt it will happen, but hey, man, you never know. The future's gonna be crazy. So
the future is shit, just like the past.
I'm gonna link that down below if you're interested in watching that. And then other than that, I should have the next lost locations. We're actually like at the final tier, so I should have that out, and I should be making more videos like this, just like one-off kind of things. So be on the lookout for that. If you haven't already, make sure you like and subscribe to this shit, because trust me, I'm trying to get to 200, 500, 1,000. We're just going up, bro, until we can't no more. You feel me? So anyways, appreciate y'all. Make sure you get laid, free to guys, and yeah, I'll catch y'all later. Deuces.